Hey Brianna, thank you for sharing this painting here for a critique. This is very solid. First, let's talk about the strengths that are in this painting before we get into areas that you can improve. So this painting, first and foremost, the likenesses are spot on. So if I can just pull up the reference image here, you've really captured the likenesses of each of these young men really, really well. There are some proportional changes, a few value corrections that I would recommend, but overall you've really captured each one of them. I feel like I could identify any one of them in a room of 100 people. So really nice job there in maintaining your proportions and getting that likeness. That doesn't just happen with proportions, that also happens with value, and you've maintained your values. Their values are pretty strong here, as well as your attention to light and shadow. And let me take a look at my notes here to see what else there is. Yeah, the colors are solid, and you did a really nice job of keeping your shadows relatively gray compared to your lights, and that also helps create a nice distinction there. And what you had told me that you think you need to improve in is in blending edges, making gradients. And I do agree with you. I think that's a really good area for you to focus on, since you're already paying attention to your values and colors very thoughtfully. In here, I actually see some very nice gradients. They're a little bit choppy, but they really convey from a distance the overall impression of this soft turning form. It looks like you struggled a little bit more in this area, particularly in this area right in here. I'm seeing a big jump between this. Even this in here seems to, it starts off pretty bright, and then it gets dark, and then it gets bright again, and it seems to be jumping pretty quick. And when I say jump, I really just mean that it's transitioning too fast, and it's showing an edge, an abrupt turn in form that might be a little too sharp. Whereas something over here, this is really kind of gently taking its time and making its way over. And so we want to go for things more like this to create those softer edges. Now, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to be working digitally here, so I'm going to share a lot of concepts that will help you apply this into your traditional painting. I'm not an expert on digital painting. I'm much more used to traditional, so I'm going to simulate a traditional experience as best I can. And before we get there, I also want to comment on how you handle your brush strokes. So what I'm seeing in here as I look at this painting is I see a lot of ridges, a lot of kind of strokes that seem to be going in this direction, as though you are following the contour of the shapes of the gradients you're trying to create. And of course that makes sense because you might want to be thoughtful about, maintaining the shape as you go. However, when you do that, you're going to end up with all these little tiny ridges. If you can, now that I've kind of pointed them out, if you can see them in here especially, or even in this jump right there, you can see them appear because you're creating streaks. And in doing that, you're not actually fully breaking up the edge, as opposed to doing a little bit of something like this with your brush. If you go in the opposite direction of that shape, it might feel a little bit scarier because you might lose the shape for a little bit and have to gain it back, but you'll actually break up that edge a lot more quickly and easily. And by breaking up the edge, you won't have these easily discernible jumps in value between things. So that's going to be a really important thing for you to keep in mind, is that when you make those gradients, you could, place your general value in here and then say your darker value in here. And when you get into here, you can work, rather than working in these kinds of streaks, you can work perpendicular and really try to break that up. And then you can make subtle tweaks and kind of smoothen out your edges as you go. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the concepts behind making gradients. And I think it'll really help you out as you're thinking about your palette, what colors you're grabbing and what you're using, and to make a very thoughtful gradient. So I'm going to do a little demonstration of these two spheres, but it's going to start with a palette. So here I've mixed some colors that are actually really similar to the reference from the portrait from this portrait here. So I've pulled those, and you can see I have a lot of colors mixed here. And it might seem really daunting to start here, and we'll get there, but if you're mixing these colors traditionally, what really you can do is you can start off with just, say, these 4 values up top. And once you have this value and this value, then you can combine both of them together to make this value right here. And then once you have this one and this one, which is just the same as this one up here, you can then combine them to make this. And so you're kind of making these called admixtures in between as you go. Now, I did choose to, in choosing these top 4 colors, I went for my darkest shadow, my brightest light, my brightest shadow, and my darkest light. And that way I can really carefully think about what color and hue I want, what value I want for that moment when it's about to turn over from light into shadow. And then again, from there I can just create all those different variations in between. Even one in here as well. Okay, so it actually is not as much work as it might seem, and while it's not necessary to have all these mixtures just to make one gradient, you might as well, if you're struggling with making gradients, you may as well start with more than what you need and really get this down. As you get better and better and more experience with making gradients, then you should be able to learn how to make these gradients with less, individually mixed colors. But again, once you start with those 4 colors up here, you can then just keep combining them to get the value variations that you want. All right, so with that being said, I want to talk about value jumps and color jumps. So in here, we can look at a color jump. So if you look at these two, there's a distinct color jump, but there's actually, these are the same values. If I take the saturation down, then you can see that these 2 values are essentially the same value. It's just the color that makes them different. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that what is connecting these is their value. So they actually have something in common, that they're the same level of brightness or darkness. And so it's actually easier to mix these 2 together because the value is the same. Now on the flip side, we have a value jump, and the color is not really changing. You can see this is brighter and this is darker, and the color is not really changing. And then this one here is a combination between these 2. This is both a color jump and a value jump, but I was careful not to go too much of a color jump or too much of a value jump, because if I added both of this and this together, let's say, let me actually do that just to show you. Let's say that we have a really vivid color, but it's also a big value jump. And let's say it looks something like this. Well, when we put these together, look at how they really jump away from each other quite a bit, as opposed to a value that's like this, or a value that's like this. These ones here are connecting much more easily into this dark gray color, whereas this is a much bigger jump. And so we want to think about what kind of jumps we want to have. And so in the photo reference, I noticed that there was both a combination of value jump and color jump as well. So if you see in here, you can kind of see it goes from this gray color in here into this kind of a dark purple color right along the edge. And then as it really hits the light, it starts to get a lot more red and orange, and then it comes out into this more of a bright kind of orange. And so those are the colors that I was going for. So I'm transitioning in my colors. Let's come back to here. So you can see as I'm going, there is a very small value jump, but also a very small color jump. And again, I'm not going too crazy here. I'm keeping them very, very small, which is why I ended up making a few of them. And then again, very small color jump, very small, value jump, and I'm just managing those as we're going and going. And you could say that these are becoming more closer to just value jumps as opposed to color jumps. But particularly if you just break this down, let's say that, so in here, this is actually the separation between light and shadow. So if you look at these are generally more of a purpley red color, and then these are more so of that orange color. So there's very intentional separation going on here and very carefully managed value jumps and color jumps. All right, so with all that being said, I want to show you what happens if we skip a few of those smaller increments. Let's say, so in this example, we have this gray color, which is in here on this shadow, and then we also have this value for the light in here, and you can see right now there's a pretty big jump between them. That makes sense. And if I try to soften this edge, let's say with purely some pressure grading, so I'm going to use this smudge tool, which is going to simulate kind of just taking a brush and pushing things back and forth. So here I'm kind of pushing these colors back. I might need to be a little bit more aggressive and push these things more. And I'm trying to, just use my brush for the pressure and just pushing the dark into the orange color. I can push the orange color into the dark color, and I can just keep kind of pushing this back and forth. And eventually, with the right pressure, I could get some kind of nice gradient. But it kind of comes at a cost, because what we're getting is a kind of a very muddy gradient. We're not really getting a color shift in this gradient, and skin in particular has a very kind of luminous effect to it. So if we look at how gray this is in the middle and how colorful these ones are, and if I go to the reference image, you can see that there's a lot of color in that transition. So we want to capture that, right? And so if you're making too big of a jump, and you can see this pressure grading that I'm doing, I'm going in this perpendicular direction. If I went like this, then I can easily end up with these kinds of weird streaks, and it becomes harder to make a gradient. I could just keep working this. Eventually I will get a soft edge, but it's not going to have the same kind of color and luminousness that I might be able to get a different way if I'm actually placing values in between all these. And you can see I'm getting a lot of contamination because I'm just pushing the paint around. Again, I'm trying to simulate traditional painting. If I'm pushing paint around, I'm going to start getting a lot of contamination, like I'm getting further and further away from the original value that I had. And it just seems like every time I, try to apply my brush, I'm just creating another edge. And I think this happens a lot when we're painting traditionally. Let me see if I can, so look at how dark this sphere has gotten, and it's almost like I need to try to come back to the original color. But again, if I'm not careful, I'm going to end up with a bit of a mess on my hands. So let me see if I can resurrect this a little bit, going back to that original color, painting it back in. So this is just a lot of work, and it's not really giving me the kind of gradient that I'm looking for. Okay. What's happening is there's just way too big of a jump between these two values and colors that they just don't really want to work together very well. All right, so let's leave it there. And now let's come over here. And this time I'm gonna try. I'm not sure how this is gonna go. I'm gonna try to use the same kind of very sharp brush that I'm using. It doesn't recognize any pressure at all. Every time I touch this, it just goes straight down very thick. There's probably a better brush like the round brush in here, which I can use, more pressure for. So maybe we'll do 2 versions and see how this goes. But I just want to start just to show you the power of having values, the right values placed in these, and what kind of effect that can create. So again, let me look at the palette. Everything is being planned out in the palette. So we have a shadow here and a light here, and we need to bridge this gap. And so I've mixed all these values in between. So we have 1, 2, and 3 in between these. So this one is in the center. So why don't we grab that value and put that right in the middle. And that's already looking like just a much nicer color. I'm gonna kind of make this fairly big. And so now what we've done is, rather than having to go from this black into this orange, we've actually made this a little bit easier, where we only have to go from this red into this black, and from this red into this orange. And these values are closer to each other than, say, the values over here. Now, there's an additional problem that kind of comes with this, though, is that we originally had just one edge, and now we have two edges. We have the edge on this side, and then we have the edge on that side. And so while we have simplified, we created what's often called a buffer or a midtone, we've put that down, we do have some more edges to address, but thankfully we came prepared. We have colors that we can use. So this color goes right in between these two, so I can put that down. And break that down. Now, again, for traditional painting, it's really, really good to always be applying paint as you are working. So before, I was just pushing paint around. That's really gonna do a lot of damage to your work. And here, I'm always adding paint as I go. So we did that side. Now let's grab the one on the other side. So now I have more edges to address, but each edge is easier to deal with. And even from a distance, as I zoom further and further out, that is starting to look like a gradient. So hypothetically, if I just keep going, I actually could, just with these very sharp edges, start to create the illusion of a gradient. And why don't we try that? So now we have a value in between. So let's knock this one down. You can see I thoughtfully made sure that all of I'm doing value jumps and color jumps. So if I just took this whole thing and put it into grayscale, oh dear, looks like I was on the wrong layer. There we go. So we can see that not only is there a color shift happening, but there's a value shift that's happening. Values are always going to be more important than color. Okay, so we did that one. Now we've got this one here in the middle, and that one I believe is going to go right in here. So we're kind of like looking at the edges and focusing on taking down the edges. And this might be a little too extreme for what's necessary. In traditional painting, you probably don't need quite so many values and colors. But again, if you're just focusing on this, it could help to start there. And you can see as I zoom further and further away, we are actually starting to create the impression of a gradient. Right now, the biggest jump to me, so the biggest jump right now is here because we haven't done this one yet. So that makes sense. So make sure I'm on the right layer again. Maybe even make this one a little bit bigger, why not? And there we go, we're starting to create a gradient. Now, how much easier would this be with a brush where I can apply different pressure as well? Before I do that though, do you see all of these streaks, all of these little marks? I've almost been too timid, and I've ended up still creating all of these little bands. Now, these bands are showing up because I have the brush that I'm using is, just putting down everything. Nothing is blending into itself at all. But what if I really went a little bit crazy and tried to really kind of break up the shapes a little bit more? So we've got that. I'm going to kind of, this might be a little bit more messy in the process, but I'm just intentionally trying to break up the shapes. And let's see if that actually helps contribute to a more powerful gradient. So maybe even not everything is going to be perfectly banded together, but just the edges will be broken up. And interestingly, it does kind of have this, the gradient actually is starting to feel a little bit softer in its own way. Just because everything is so broken up, it's hard to see we don't see these same bands or shapes anymore. We're getting the impression of a gradient coming through in this more looser style. And you could throw on a little highlight on top, and then this ball is really starting to look pretty three-dimensional. Pretty cool. All right, so now I'm going to, I'll kind of reset myself. So I'm going to go back to that original light value. Something like that. And then the original shadow value. And then I'm going to take that same middle value and punch this in. And then now, so I have those distinct separation. So I have the original light, the original shadow, and then I just put this in between value and right in between. And now I'm going to change my brush to something that will simulate traditional painting a little bit more easily, where I can have a little bit of a pressure difference. So, but again, just because I have this pressure doesn't mean that I'm not going to be thoughtless about, I'm going to be careful about which values I'm still going for. So the same thing, I'm going to go back to this value, which is going to be nicely and neatly in here. And as I go over this, you can see, oh, and actually that's interesting. You can see here's a little opacity thing. So that might help. There we go. So now I can kind of push this in. You can see just as I'm working on this, I'm kind of trying to dissolve the original edge between the mid-tone, but I'm also, you can see it's kind of getting a little bit lighter. The pressure is not as heavy, and it's breaking this up really quickly. I can get this value in between. Still, same way, I'm always applying paint into this, but I'm just trying to soften these things. This gradient very well might still have some character by the time that I'm done, but it's really starting to soften quite a bit now. And so now I can go for this value, or is that right? No, we're going to go for this value over here. Break this down. Letting these things kind of spill into each other. And this is not like, honestly, I find that traditional painting is a lot easier to manually make gradients like this. And again, notice how I'm being really careful to stay in my lane. I'm not taking this color and going all the way out here. I'm being really, really thoughtful. I'm being really thoughtful to stay in my lane for each value. And then now I'm going to focus on these values that are go in between. So in here, some things are starting to spill over at this point, and that's okay. We want the edge to be dissolved. And then if I have to go back to a value, to another value that I already put down, that's okay. So I'm kind of finding I'm recreating another edge in here. So I'm going to go back to that original mid-tone value and drop that in. Again, always being careful to be working with the right shade in the right area. Just because I can apply pressure really carefully doesn't mean that I want to apply that pressure with the wrong color. I don't want to take this color and put it in here. Look at how gray and ugly that gets. So I'm staying in my lane. Let's start to branch out. And you can see I'm kind of, well, you might not be able to tell, but I'm going in this kind of circular motion almost, which seems to be lending itself a little bit more easily for digital. With oil paint, I might be just rocking back and forth kind of like this motion here. And again, I'm just looking for any edges that jump out to me that don't belong. And I could just work and work and work on this until I turn blue. Let's see, looks like I should go for this little in-between value for this little edge right there. And I'm trying not to go like too far over here. I do want this gradient to be compressed and to maintain its shape, which can take some time to figure out how to maintain the right shape as you're working. So it might involve kind of pushing and pulling a little bit, but if I'm going to push, I'm not going to push this value too far. I'm just going to take my time and go to the right value to get the job done. So right there, I may have pushed it a little too far, but I'll just come back in with a value that's going to go in between that edge that I just created. I'm almost, it might be a little too aggressive language, but I'm like thinking of myself as an edge killer. Anytime I see an edge, I'm like, okay, I got to take that down. Got to make it go away, make it dissolve. And you can see just some lingering reds in here. And you can just see the difference between these two gradients, how rich this one is on the right. It's not perfect. And like I said, I'm very unfamiliar with working digitally. So I'm struggling quite a bit here. Just trying to compress the gradient a little bit. It kind of feels very wide and I'm just kind of pushing it in. Gonna get this original darker shadow and push it in a little bit more. And hopefully you can see I'm in no rush. I'm just taking my time, whatever it takes to get the job done. But that's looking pretty good. It has kind of a loose impression to it. It doesn't feel like there's bands of different colors. It's nicely broken up and it's starting to feel quite round. And as I clean up other aspects of this sphere, which, you know, is pretty chunky in of itself, like you look at, you know, how this edge is just spilling all the way over. There's a few things that I could clean up, but you can see it's already becoming quite round despite those things. And with a highlight, even a highlight, I could, you know, grab this darker value first, maybe drop it in right in here and fade it out a little bit with some gentle pressure. And then I can go for that brightest value in here. Once again, putting a little gentle pressure and then maybe hit it a little bit harder with something. And now we're getting a pretty strong representation of a sphere. So I hope this was helpful for you in in how to think and how to prepare your palette. So to recap, it's mixing your palette in a way where you're making incremental value jumps and color jumps. Sometimes some of the colors that you might use might only be value jumps, or they might only be color jumps, depending on what kind of gradient that you need to make. But typically with gradients that have to do with light and shadow, you'll have to manage both value and color. And on top of that, also remember to control the direction of your brush strokes, and that if you're constantly going in this direction, you're going to end up with a lot of bands and a lot of streaks, and it's going to really break up, well, it's not going to break up the gradients. But if you work in different angles and different directions, kind of pushing back and forth very gently and staying in the right area of that gradient. So rather than working big like this, work small, work inside these little spaces, maybe something like here, or then in another area with the right value, work in here, and just keep breaking up that edge, feathering a little bit, nice and gentle, and hopefully that will help you manage your gradients much, much better. All right, so I hope this was helpful and that you now have a system for making gradients. And if you have any questions, please let me know and we'll stay in touch. All right, take care.